Good afternoon, everyone. I'm calling the Monday, May 1st Board of Supervisor regular meeting to order. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. During this moment of silence, I ask that we all keep the family of Joe Wink in our thoughts and prayers. Joe was a county employee for almost 19 years and just recently passed away. Joe's hire date was August 2004. Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion, a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Moving into the presentation portion of the agenda, I understand.
Dr. Grimsley gave her regrets. She cannot be here today. She did upload her report and calendar. They're available for the board and public to review.
All right, and I think we all got the cards for the graduates.
I think so. They're picked up from the office or at your spot today, I think. So hopefully you'll take an opportunity to congratulate the graduates for this year.
Yes.
And I'd just like to say real quick that I was fortunate enough to make it to the demonstration high school put on. That was, I think, organized by Cat Waters with the fire companies, and it was incredible.
The mock motor vehicle crash.
The mock motor vehicle crash, which was, I think, 2 weeks ago. Is that right?
Yeah.
So I'd just like to thank the schools and the fire companies for doing that. It was informative.
And graduation is May.
Let's be sure. 26, 7 p.m.
All right. Moving on to Company 4 monthly report to the board and community. Chief Gerald.
I think I got this right last time. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me back. First, I want to apologize for leaving so abruptly last briefing, last month. We were dispatched on a vehicle fire that turned into an extension to a structure and then went up into the wood line. So we had two companies fighting it from two directions and were able to put that fire out. But again, I apologize for leaving so quickly. I did print out a couple of pictures, one of that truck fire and two pictures of the structure fire from Friday afternoon, Friday evening into the late hours of Friday night. To give you a sense of when we say we're going to a fire or a working fire, that's really what I tend to be talking about, is the intensity of some of these calls. If you would recall that the revitalization plan that I briefed last month and provided you a copy of is 3 phases. First phase is complete. That was sort of that assessment and stabilization phase. We're in the process of working on phase 2. Phase 2 is a longer phase. It's about day 61 to about the first year. So there's a lot of focus in things like training and certifications that are required either by the state, the county, or nationally. And we're working on membership. And so we're working towards those things. Of course, we're continuing to run calls as we are every day. We have some people, some of our applicants, some of our members for Flint Hill Volunteer Fire Company are working to affiliate to the Rappahannock County Fire and Rescue Department so that the EMS agency license kicks in and they're able to support ambulance calls. At some point, and the membership, this ties back to membership, at some point we'll be able to hold membership meetings. We had a meeting scheduled for today. We were here in court about a week and a half ago, and the judge and the attorneys discussed lifting the restriction through the consent order on holding meetings. And while the judge okayed that, we haven't received the modified consent order. So this month's meeting won't be held, but we're hopeful that we'll be able to have that in June. So we're moving forward either way. With regard to training, we have 10 new CPR qualified folks in the county. We hosted a class, all 10 people, all 10 students were from the Flint Hill area and Huntley area. I have 3 drivers in training. If you have access to any of the radio communications, I've heard I'm on the radio a lot, and what I'm doing is training new drivers, the area, how to get to the hospitals, and we go to 4 area hospitals, right? So we're going to Warren County, Fauquier County, Culpeper County, and all the way over into Page County, because the chance that we run a call into Sperryville's area and have an auto accident there, and the closest hospital could be Page. So I have the new drivers rotate through all those different places. We can tackle typically about 2 hospitals in about 3 hours. And what they're learning in that process is, one, managing the vehicle, the weight of the vehicle, because it's different. We've got the big box on the back and it's heavy and all that. It changes weight distribution. They're learning radio communications, how to communicate with dispatch effectively and succinctly. And so they're working through all those things simultaneously. And so one driver has completed all of the driver time. What I add, just for higher level of assurance for the candidate, is I have them ride with me on a dispatched call. Otherwise, the other training is just us training. We're out without a dispatch call. But I have them drive with me while I'm going to a dispatch call. The dynamic changes when you turn all the lights and sirens on and you inject a lot of traffic that's getting out of your way or not getting out of your way. But it changes that dynamic, and I want them to experience that. And then the very last call that releases them to drive as an ambulance driver is them driving with me as their passenger on a dispatch call. And it just gives them a higher level of assurance. All of that gets documented in a training record, and it goes in their personnel file so that we have that in the weird off chance that we have a liability issue, we have those kind of training records available. Last weekend and the weekend prior, I took our Tanker 4 out of service and went to Faukier's Training Burn Center. We have the firefighter training class that's been going on here in the county for quite a few months. They're in the phase of their practical experiences in fires and going into an actual burning building. So I took our tanker to support that effort. One of the assistant chief from Chester Gap and I drove there a week and a half ago. I drove there on Saturday. And they're making great progress, and we expect to see them graduate from that fire academy towards, I think it's the middle of this month. So we'll have new firefighters in the county as a result of that, which is, to me, just phenomenal news. And lastly, I didn't want to take a lot of your time today. I just wanted to give you some progress updates. We had a member, Connie Harris, formerly Huff, pass away recently. I actually personally placed what we call bunting to show our mourning and respect for that individual. We put that up at the station and have recently taken it down. It's been about a week and a half, 10 days or so. But I just wanted to let you know, since you had expressed the passing of one person, we actually lost 2. In our case, if you add that person, lost another volunteer in the community. So thank you. That's all I've got, unless you have questions.
I have a couple.
Yes, sir.
The driver's training, if you're not taking on, excuse me,
Can you pull your mic?
if you're not taking on members, how are you covering them for insurance purposes, whatever, for training? How are they training?
They're, so because we've affiliated to the Rappahannock County Fire and Rescue Department, the coverage carries through there.
So they're members of the Rappahannock Fire and Rescue.
Right, they've affiliated to them. They call it affiliating, and they've affiliated there, yes. In, let's see,
So, not to be
in,
playing on words, they have become members of the Rappahannock County Fire and Rescue?
yes,
Okay. But you're doing a training? So
I'm doing the training.
You've actually affiliated too?
Yes, sir.
All right, so that's a question that's been asked me, and I told people that's what I thought, but
Yes, sir.
I probably should have asked the question.
Sure, sure.
And then the firefighter school, what are the age requirements for taking firefighter one?
They have to be 16 years old, the individual does. They can't start running independently in structure fires on a live, like the call in Chester Gap. They can't run those calls until they're 18 years of age. But they can get the requisite training up until the time that they're 18, and they can support in exterior operations. So if it's a small brush fire or something like that, or exterior operations on a house fire, they can support those. They just can't go into those hazardous fire situations until they're 18. And to completely answer your question, the other age limit is really determined by the individual. Myself, I'm 63. I still go into those calls. I guess I just don't have better sense, but there's no limit on the other end of that age.
I was just told by one young man that he wasn't allowed to go to this past training school.
Yeah, I don't know who the individual is, but the requirement is 16 years old, and with parents' consent, because you have to have that guardian or parent sign, they can attend the academy. They can attend a lot of different classes. CPR.
Well, that's what I thought. This
yeah.
has been on the books for, that law, I think this statute's been on the books for over 30 years.
That's right.
Maybe 40.
Yeah,
We had two young members that went from Amosville to the General Assembly and testified in front of a committee to keep this junior firefighter classification on the books.
Yes, sir.
And then this gentleman that's going to be 17 this summer told me he wasn't allowed to go to.
Well, they do need to be associated with one of our local volunteer companies, and there might be some
They were?
sort of process in that company that the chief there needs to sign off. I don't know, but there wouldn't be a restriction on the other end. There
Right,
are a
but
couple
in
high
our-
school kids in this class.
Right, in our case, while I'm in the assignment, 16 years of age, as long as I've got a parent's authorization, they can go. Where I came from in Prince William County, I ran with a department called OWL. It's the Occoquan Woodbridge Lord and Volunteer Fire Department. It's a big fire department. And we had a large population of what we call junior firefighters. And they were 16 to 18 years old. And they were amazingly active and amazingly supportive on the scene of calls, as long as they knew what their limitation was, right? So they can't go into that burning building. But they were amazingly supportive on things like auto accidents, for getting tools to the firefighters that were going to cut cars open or whatever it is that had to happen on that scene. So I had heard a story, sir, that situation had occurred. And I talked to the guardian about that, and I said, I'm not sure who you heard that from, but the ordinance is 16 years old to 18, and as I explained, so that's what I know.
It's my understanding because, I mean, they actually said the words that they were told they couldn't go.
Yeah, do you know who told them that?
I do not.
Yeah, it surely didn't come from us, and not from me, because I've been an advocate of a junior program, getting younger firefighters supporting the program. As a matter of fact, the reason I went back to the Burn Center in Fauquier County on Saturday is because they had, Fauquier County had an entire class of under 18-year-old, I think there were 12 male, 1 female, candidate firefighters. They were all in the training academy. They were all fighting in these scenarios we experienced on Saturday. They were doing simulated car fires, interior fires. They didn't actually burn anything, but they simulated those things. But it was nice to see an entire class of 13 of our youth going through that class. It's phenomenal.
I'll try and find out more information.
Absolutely. But yeah, I heard the same story before I arrived.
Any other
Any
questions?
other questions?
I just want to say thank you to you and your team and all the members who have been really active since this revitalization plan went into effect, and I really appreciate your very thorough communication. And only one follow-up question, obviously from the photographs that you provided to us, as recently as the last week, you've been very active, and I wonder how many individual volunteers, members of Company 4 are going out on calls right now. What's the total pool of members who are responding to these calls on Company 4's behalf?
So we've been dispatched since the resolution was signed, and really, we're talking, I hear beeps, I start thinking pagers, I'm sorry. Since the resolution was signed, Company 4 has been dispatched on 71 calls, just a higher than normal volume. Normally, and I think you've heard the statistics before, the normal average breakdown is about 75% EMS calls and about 25% fire-related auto accidents, things like that. In our situation, it's interesting. We've run, and I checked that because I was thinking the same thing. We've been dispatched on 38 EMS calls and 33 fire calls, which is just out of the norm for a variety of reasons, right? We had the bad windstorms that night. And some of the calls that I call it scratching when you don't respond on a call. There were 2 or 3 calls that night, if I recall correctly, where we could not respond because we were already on other calls, whether it was a structure fire, a downed power line, or some other scenario that prompted that. But on Friday's call, as an example, Mr. Whitson, to respond to your question, we had 3 of our members respond. There were actually 2 other board members. So we were able to get the tanker to the scene, which was absolutely needed and was requested immediately upon dispatch by Chester Gap's chief. So I drove that there. And we were able to get the engine there as well for supplemental support. But there are a lot of calls where I'm on the unit by myself, middle of the night, weekends, whatever. And sometimes during the day. But that's the idea behind all the training I'm doing with these new folks, is to get new ambulance drivers running. Because if I can have some relief on the EMS side by those people driving, and we respond as driver only. That's the configuration, if you will, of how we handle EMS. ALS 1400, that chase vehicle that we have, goes to the unit. We show up with the ambulance to transport if needed. It works really well. It's pretty seamless. And so having new drivers, of course, will be great. Having new firefighters even better, because we have that. We're starting to grow, I hope, the skill set, the certifications, and the requisite training exponentially to help this county as a whole.
Thanks a lot. One last question. You mentioned that, I think you said there are 10 new qualified citizens with CPR training. Do you have any sense of those 10 people, how many of them might be interested in joining Company 4 as a volunteer, or is it a totally separate initiative and unrelated to your company?
No, it's actually, I'm sorry I wasn't more clear. Those are actually completely related to Company 4. They are either members who their certification, CPR certification in this case, has expired, or they're affiliating to Rappahannock County Rescue and Fire. So now we have 10 more people with that CPR certification. By no means am I done providing CPR training. Thanks to Kat Waters. There was a mention about Kat Waters earlier. She was our instructor for that training, and I'll be using all of the available resources in the county to train more folks for CPR training, because we have a laundry list of folks that are scheduled and ready to go, or not scheduled, but have requested to be scheduled to participate in the future training.
Great.
Yes,
Thanks for all you do.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, going to open public comment. Anyone wishing to speak today, please be recognized, and when you come up, give us your name and the district you're from. those too. Anita Ramos, Hampton District. By the way, I was listening to a meeting of one of the boards, and it was very hard to hear the people. So please use those contraptions closer so that we can hear what you say, okay? In my wanderings today, I was in a Safeway in Falls Church this morning and picked up something called Blue Ridge Outdoors. I've run into this on and off for probably easily 20 years. And it is basically advertising for all kinds of counties and entities. This one is Jefferson County, West Virginia, whole page. This one, Grundy. There'll be a quiz as to where these places are.
Southwest.
Yeah, very southwest.
Very south and west.
Very south and west, yes. Here's an ad for Massanutten, and also an ad for Adventures in the Gorge in New River Gorge National Park. There's just ads all over the place for all kinds of places in various states, obviously not just Virginia. Please, let's start spending some money on advertising in some way, shape, or form. I'm not going to say that this is a be-all and end-all, but we need to start reminding the world that we exist, and I hope that we'll be doing that soon. The other thing is I went to opening night at our town at the theater at Little Washington, and it was absolutely fabulous. There's one more show this weekend, and I urge everyone, if there's still tickets, because it was packed on Friday night, if there's still tickets, you ought to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the courtroom? Not seeing anyone in the courtroom. Is there anyone on Zoom wishing to speak? If so, please raise your Zoom hand. Not seeing any Zoom hands. I'll close public comment. The things that COVID has done to us, that is just going to continue.
Thank you.
All right, moving into consent agenda.
Madam Chair, could we, at least the one set, March 6 minutes, I have a slight change I'd like to make to those. But other than that, I'm okay with the rest of the consent agenda.
Up before a motion.
I'm sorry, that can be a motion, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll second the motion to adopt the consent agenda without the minutes of, I think you said March 6th.
Yes,
March
sir.
6th.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? All right. Go into the minutes on March 6th.
Okay, March 6th, I guess it's, I think it's page 5. And it's the second paragraph under Company 4 Monthly Report to Board and Community. The first sentence reads, Mr. Frazier referenced the report made last month and said that Chief Gerald indicated that the grant funding equipment, I'd like indicated to be changed to stated.
Sorry, I'm just catching up to you. If you could tell me that page number again.
Page 5.
Second paragraph under the Company 4 monthly report. Mr. Fraser,
First sentence.
referenced the report so that Chief Gerald indicated that the grant funded equipment.
And then.
What did you want to change there?
Change it to stated. Indicated to stated.
Fine with me.
Okay.
All right, in the very last, I'd like to add a sentence, short sentence, 43 words. I'm just kidding.
So,
Last the last sentence, a new sentence, Mr. Frazier maintained the removal of the equipment was nowhere in the emails from the state.
Maintained,
Maintained.
main. Sorry, I missed you there. It's a new sentence and it's maintained what?
Oh. I've got a frog in my throat. Mr. Frazier maintained the removal of the equipment was nowhere in the emails from the state.
Okay.
I say that up in there, but I just thought I'd make sure that it's carried home.
Sounds good to me.
That's all I have, unless somebody else has something else. I'll put that in the form of a motion.
I'll second the motion to adopt the March 6 minutes with the revisions that Mr. Frazier just articulated.
We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. All right. We have I guess it's, yep, one resolution, one proclamation. Thank you.
Don't cry, Madge.
Resolution of appreciation and commendation from the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors to Madge L. Carter for her service to the citizens of Rappahannock County. Whereas Madge L. Carter retired from public service to the citizens of Rappahannock County on April 30th, 2023, and whereas more than 32 years ago, in November 1990, Ms. Carter was hired by the Virginia Department of Health, serving the Fauquier County office before transferring to the Rappahannock County office in March of 1999. Whereas through her service as a local VDH environmental health employee, Ms. Carter aided countless citizens to properly install and repair the wells and septic systems on their properties, and was recognized by the Culpeper Soil and Water Conservation District with their District Service Award in 2017 for her contributions to the TMDL Cost Share Program. Her work in this program helped create cleaner Rappahannock County watersheds for recreational activities. And whereas her service has also been instrumental in the delivery of all VDH environmental health programs to Rappahannock County citizens and visitors, to include the provision of food safety requirements for local restaurants, which venues are critical to the local tourism. And now therefore be it resolved that the members of the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors hereby express their appreciation of and commendation to Madge L. Carter for her long and distinguished service, and wish her good health and best wishes during retirement. And be it further resolved that this resolution be spread across the minutes of the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors for all citizens to reflect upon the service and accomplishments of this dedicated public servant, adopted this first day of May, 2023. Mr. Frazier, I thought you might want to read this one. Proclamation Older Americans Month. And I think we have someone from Rappahannock.
Joyce Winger.
Joyce Winger. Whereas Rappahannock County, Virginia includes a growing number of older Americans who contribute their time, wisdom, and experience to our community. And whereas communities benefit when people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds have the opportunity to participate and live independently. And whereas Rappahannock County citizens recognize the need to create a community that offers the services and supports older adults may need to make choices about how they age. And whereas the Rappahannock County community is well supported by non-government partners, including Rapid Home and the Area Agency on Aging, led by the RRCS. And whereas Rappahannock County government and its partners work to build an even better community for our older residents by not limiting our thinking about aging, exploring and combating stereotypes, emphasizing the many positive aspects of aging, inspiring older adults to push past traditional boundaries, and embracing our community's diversity. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors do hereby proclaim May 2023 to be Older Americans Month and urge every resident to celebrate our older citizens, help to create an inclusive society, and accept the challenge of flexible thinking around aging, adopted this first day of May 2023. Thank you for all you do.
Thank Thanks for all you do, Joyce. Thank you.
All right. Moving into appointments.
There are just two appointment terms that are coming up. Their appointment term is expiring in the coming months. One is for the REMS Council. Those are 3-year terms. The position that is expiring is held currently by Donald Gore, and your policy requires staff to inform the board of these pending vacancies. If you recall, the last time we went through this, there was a discussion of, from REMS saying that they suggest volunteer representation, career representation, and citizen representation. Mr. Atkins was appointed at that time and said to be the volunteer representative. So staff is ready to take direction from the board on how you'd like to handle recruitment for this position. I have not spoken with Mr. Gore and whether he has any interest to continue. I certainly would like to find a way to have some career representation if possible, although we're at a transient time here, so I'm not sure how that would best be done.
But historically, the volunteers have put forward a name, and I think that's something that we ought to at least give some room for in our decision-making. We don't really have too many career people, and I think we had Mr. Polster running around in quite a few areas that I don't see how he'd be able to keep up with all of them if somebody was to take that position. We don't even have anybody right now in his position.
Well, we have Mr. Stevens on an interim temporary basis, so.
But we'd have no continuity if we appointed him temporarily.
Correct.
So what's the, to your point that, volunteers would normally put someone forward for a REMS position, would it be by way of the County Fire and Rescue Association?
Yeah, I believe if they had it on their agenda, they would probably come up with a
Okay.
recommendation. And maybe we could only do it for 1 year or something. I don't know what the ramifications of doing that would be, but.
So how do we make that happen? Someone needs to communicate with Chief Burke,
Yeah, I'd be happy to reach out to Chief Burke and ask him to
put it on the agenda.
we'll do whatever he thinks is most appropriate. I guess he controls the agenda, but let him know the board's interest, and I suspect that would lead him to put it on the agenda.
Okay, and the term expires June 2023, you said?
No, it's a 3-year term, so, yes, the current term expires June 2023,
Okay.
yeah.
So we still have time.
Yes.
That would make sense. An appointment at June or July would make sense.
Okay.
And then Planning Commission.
Similar conversation, the Planning Commission representative for Stonewall Hawthorne, that term ends July 7, 2023. So this is one of those positions that the policy suggests I should place a notice in the paper without getting direction from the board, but I guess the board could waive that at this point if you want to. That's my intention, to place a notice in the local newspaper to see if there are others who have interest in filling that position.
I'd be interested to hear from Mr. Carney on this front. I believe that Stonewall Hawthorne is a very strong and thoughtful member of the Planning Commission, and Mr. Light, and I think we'd all be well served if he was interested in continuing. I don't know if you've heard anything in that regard.
I have spoken with Mr. Light, and he has indicated that he continues and wishes to continue serving. But if the policy is to advertise, I mean, I think that that's fine.
The default is to advertise, and then at the end of the policy, it says the board can waive the policy. And you've done that a few other times, I think most recently for Water and Sewer Authority, where you chose not to advertise because you had some people in the pipeline. But it can go however the board wants to do.
I fully support Mr. Light continuing to serve, so, but I'm good either way on advertising.
I'd love to save money and not advertise if we're not running afoul of any.
Yeah, absent a motion to do something other than advertising, that's what's gonna happen. Because that's what the policy says to do.
Well, then I'll go ahead and make a motion to not advertise.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I'd just say I agree. There's a lot going on at the planning commission level. And Mr. Light brings a depth knowledge and historical institutional knowledge that we need right now to get through these projects.
Good.
But then if I might be so bold as to say, the policy also suggests the person be present at your meeting when they're appointed, but that also could be waived, and you could dispatch with this immediately and never see it on the agenda
Waive
again.
all of the formalities.
If there was a motion to appoint Mr. Light for another 4-year term.
Can we do that
Absolutely.
today?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, then I'll go ahead and make a motion to appoint Mr. Light for another 4-year term.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Would we need to amend that to include
And-
waiving all of the formalities?
And waive.
Waiving all
formalities. Thank you.
Motion amended.
Second amended.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Light.
Thank you.
Yes. That's what. All right.
The next item was there only in case there was action necessary related to Company 4. Not aware of any needed, but I held it there in case something came up during the presentation.
That makes sense. All right, Board of Zoning Appeals, number of members.
Yes, Ms. Smith brought this up initially, and then there was an action by the majority of the board requesting staff to review the county ordinance to determine what would need to change if the board was in mind to expand the BZA from 5 members to 7 members. I've attached an analysis of the code. There are several places throughout the code that would need to be touched. Many instances of the word 3 turning to the word 5, because for action to be taken by the BZA for variances and appeals, there must be a majority of the membership, not a majority of those present, which would be 3 today, and that would be 5 if the body expanded to 7. And then one instance of the word 5 changing to 7. Which is the obvious size of the committee, or of the BZA. If there are any other questions related to the comments attached to board docs, happy to try to answer them. And then if the board would like to move forward with this, I can prepare this information in the form of an ordinance amendment and advertise it for public hearing.
Last time we talked about this, I felt like I was the lone dissent member of our board on this front. I just, for the record, and looking ahead to the likelihood that we will do away with special use permits altogether and blend them into just a single category of special zoning permits, and that responsibility will fall on us. That seems to obviate the need, at least in my mind, to expand the BZA membership to include additional members, because it's likely that the BZA, as we've discussed previously, going forward likely will meet once or twice a year at best. And I don't know that adding more people under those circumstances necessarily provides our citizens with a more effective body. And so I just wanted to state that I even if I might be alone in this regard, I would not support expanding the BZA membership from 5 to 7 members.
I just wanted to say that I understand that, and I would agree if the next appointment was in relatively short order, or the next chance for another new appointment or resignation or someone's term ending was in relatively short order, but the next opportunity, unless there's somebody that resigns ahead of the end of their term, isn't until 2024.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, I do understand that, and then my other point would be that appeals are very important. And what we recently had issue with was in fact an appeal. And so to me, if we can get a little different balance on that BZA and shore them up with maybe some more experienced members that come from a strong zoning background, I think that would be super helpful to them. I don't think that this should be construed in any way as a punitive idea. It was never intended that way. It was just intended to strengthen the BZA and hopefully to add some voices that will shore up their processes.
Yeah, those are all good points. Thank you.
Mr. Makala said, I believe it was at the last meeting, that he would welcome augmenting it. And I spoke to him afterwards, and he actually vocalized that again and said, we need help. And so that is, after it was brought up, and he mentioned it, I said, well, I get what Mr. Whitson was saying, but, packing or more people on there could become unwieldy.
Yeah.
However, since he signaled that they wanted it and thought it would be helpful, they're having a hard time getting some basic functions of that body done, and so they seem to want more bodies to help.
Good.
I can see an upside.
All right. Pretty convincing. Okay.
I want to give them all the help that they need. I think that they've gone through a little bit of a patch where I think there's hope to just make this a smoother, especially if we do streamline SUPs and SEs together for variance and appeals. I think that there's some hope for clarity there.
Okay.
Did we clarify whether we would be able to send letters to the appointing judge or?
Yeah, that's a good question.
You can definitely do that. There's a question to the extent to which they will pay attention to them. I think there's precedence in many other localities that they pay attention to them.
Okay.
But you don't ever tell a judge what you want.
No, I think they welcome some input. I can't see this slate of judges just ignoring something from the Board of Supervisors that says, we think this person is a good candidate.
Okay.
The one piece of clarity that I'm not sure if I wrote it, I did write it in the narrative here, is that this isn't a zoning ordinance, so public hearings before the Planning Commission and the board would be necessary, or a joint public hearing at some point in time to make this change.
Okay.
So in development of that ordinance, it would be helpful for me to know how you would want that to go, and that really is a function of how quickly you think this needs to happen.
Okay.
And of course, you still have to hear from the public, but
I think it should happen pretty quickly. It seems like the bones are in order.
yeah, it's not hard to make the changes.
So I would rather make them sooner than later if it's something that's productive for everyone. I don't know if you need a motion and a vote on this, Gary?
I would prefer a motion expressing a desire to hold a joint public hearing at a time that's
A
available to all
mutually
parties.
agreeable date of the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I have one administrative question, which is, how are the terms lining up now? Would this be one of those things where we give, does the judge, how does that happen?
They're 5-year terms, and it is set by the judge, and I think this would be an opportunity to take a look at that and fix any issues. I think there is a little bit out of alignment right now, but that can be a recommendation to the judge as well, I think, and probably be looked upon favorably.
Okay.
And I'll just say that Ms. Smith and Mr. Carney helped change my mind, so thank you for that. Don't get carried away,
We
though.
can disagree sometimes. It's okay too, Karen.
No, that's all right.
But I
No,
just wanted,
you make great points, so I can I'm thinking about it differently now, so,
Appeals are very important. It's really important that we get them right.
yep.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Chester Gap Volunteer Fire Department.
As an update for the board, as you're well aware, the last several years, the board has entered into an agreement with the Chester Gap Volunteer Fire Department, Company 9, for them to provide staff for an ambulance, or actually medic unit. That's been in parallel with agreement from Warren County. I have in the last month met with representatives of Warren County as well as the chief of Chester Gap to discuss the continuation of that as has been budgeted. We're analyzing the administrative side of things, and the draft agreement attached includes a minor change in that it pulls the paragraph that was a whereas paragraph that said that Chester Gap agreed to provide an ambulance that's staffed to be in the agreed section. So the county agrees to provide money, they agree to provide staff. And it also pinned onto the end of that sentence that they're responsible to ensure proper state and federal labor laws are being followed. So I'm hoping that something will be ironed out between now and your next meeting so that this can continue without any disruption. And we're just trying to get ourselves, Warren County representatives, and Chester Gap representatives all on the same page at this point.
Thank you, Scott.
Just an update on pole-mounted speed display signs. I know this is a priority for the board. There's been a lot of other priorities of the board here recently, but I have been in contact with VDOT regarding the design of the signs. I've shared previously with the board a package product that you can purchase from the sign company that we've talked about that includes a pole and concrete base and all sorts of things. My discussion with VDOT seems to allow us to avoid that costly expense and rather use basically two standard square tube post bases instead. So right now at the locations of these signs, you have a regulatory sign marker, which has a single square tube pole with a breakaway base. And we can add a second one, appropriate distance away, and have two, and then have the sign and whatnot mounted above that. So should make things a lot more affordable. And VDOT, the regional traffic engineer, has agreed to that. That's the only update I have for you today.
And the 5 locations that you've got approval or tentative approval for are?
These, the Viewtown Road site can only happen if we request a speed study, which would likely cause the regional traffic engineer to recommend moving the speed zone, as we discussed previously, and I think there's no interest in that, and that's where the board thought maybe one of the temporary signs would be better suited in that location.
We're gonna have to do something, just this past Saturday. It wasn't in that section, but it was on Viewtown Road. I saw a Maryland driver behind me, not that Maryland drivers are that bad, but I tend to think that they are. But I gave them plenty of sight distance that I was gonna turn in my driveway, it's 45 through there, and they passed me on a double yellow line going uphill that approximately 30 years ago, we had a head-on collision that was the same type of thing, only a little bit further, less than 1/10 of a mile further up the road, and it was a fatality.
Yeah, certainly a very dangerous situation.
And, yeah, you know, I'm getting really fed up with it. It's I don't know what to do. I get passed on the left while I'm trying to turn in my driveway.
Sperryville's the same way.
It's,
People are out of
and you know, we could have a sheriff's office as mean and nasty as the Gestapo, and they can't catch everybody.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to do.
It's unlikely somebody who's willing to pass on a double yellow is going to ignore all signs. So
Yeah,
I really don't know what to do about that.
somehow, somebody has got to, get the DMV and tell them to stop giving driver's licenses to stupid people.
What action's needed here?
Nothing right now, and marching forward slowly.
I think, Mr. Frager, I think you just ended up in the newspaper with that last quote. That was a pretty good one.
They won't print it. Something
Fire
needs to
levy.
be done.
Fire levy board referral.
Need to talk to this?
Sure, you want to give it some time? If needed.
So, in an earlier Board of Supervisors meeting, the board contemplated perhaps forensic audit and then decided that perhaps more appropriate would be to request the Fire Levy Board to review the financial policies that were in place in Fauquier and Spotsylvania that were brought forward by the Assistant County Administrator. The Fire Levy Board took on that task and did review those documents as identified in your the board docs narrative. And ultimately, the very high-level picture of the discussion was that in order for anything to be effective, there needs to be buy-in from the association and the companies. And it has to be a mutual process rather than a commandment, a rule that must be followed.
Yeah.
So that was really came to the formation of the motion that was passed by the Fire Levy Board, which was to recommend back to the Board of Supervisors that policy information be referred to the association for review, and that they pay, in particular, focus on requirements for third-party accounting, consistent use of QuickBooks for all the companies. And then if they can handle in a timely manner, start to dig into cash handling and credit card use policies, which were all included in the policies from those other counties. There was a recommendation and discussion regarding annual audits and whether they should remain every other year, and the discussion was that they should stay every other year, but then have a review of some sort in the off year. And then lastly, that the association report back to the board on the feasibility of implementing all of these items and their review over all of the Fauquier County fiscal policies in an effort by them, of them, to standardize processes to improve and increase the confidence of the public.
I really appreciate the Fire Levy Board's work on this, and my only reaction is the first 5 items I think are excellent, and it seems to strike a balance between standardization of financial accounting practices across all the companies in a consistent way. The only one I would question if we were to send this to the County Fire and Rescue Association, I don't know that the last item is necessarily something on which it would be fair to ask the Fire and Rescue Association to act, because it, to me, it feels like a bit of a punt, not on the Fire Levies Board, but if we were to kind of send a consolidated list of those things that the Fire Levy Board has agreed would make sense for all the companies to adopt as a matter of policy, I think we ought to stop at the 5th bullet point, which is the alternating between a formal audit and an annual review. I don't know if Mr. Carney, you
So my understanding of it was that that last bullet point is really for reference, so that the first 5 have a static document to reference it
okay.
to. So you could go back to the Spotsylvania or the Fauquier to say, hey, third-party accounting, cash handling, credit card use. Oh, here's an example. And that's what I thought that we kind of had talked about, was that the attending documents that we were referencing at that Fire Levy Board meeting were those documents. And so that if we just pass this along, sort of without them, it
they
could
don't
be,
have, it's like reinventing the wheel.
it's just, it's background information.
Okay, so maybe,
That, but I mean, to your point, I get what you're saying, and I think also that I went to the last association meeting and I briefly mentioned, because there was a discussion going on, that we would be talking about this today. And there was a lot of folks in the room said, yeah, that's something that we basically already, a lot of this stuff we already do.
Good.
And I let them know that the biggest takeaway at the fire levy board meeting was that it had to be from the association, from the companies, and it had to be total buy-in. So that was really the point. That last bullet point shouldn't be, hey, look at this and see if you want to implement it. It's really more about, I mean,
I think there was a general thought that when you really dig into those two policies, which are in many ways parallel, there wasn't a lot, none of it was very onerous. But there was little interest in pushing any of the requirements on the association or the volunteer community, but an interest to say, hey, association and members, if you review this and you say, yeah, that all looks great, then you can do it all. But that can come from them if it's onerous or not.
Right.
And it's not, there was what is the association's thought on all of the parts? Is it an onerous ask? If it is, well then, obviously it's something we don't want to do on top of all the other things they have to do. But if it's not, it might be a great way to standardize.
These 5 things, which I discussed with Mr. Stenner, who's a constituent of mine and serves on the fire levy board, I really think these are decidedly not onerous policies, and they make a whole lot of common sense. So if you want to put forward a motion, I'd be happy to support it and see where we go.
I will then make a motion to refer to the Rappahannock County Fire and Rescue Association, the recommendations of the fire levy board as presented.
I'll second your motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Fauquier Hospital Community Concerns.
I asked this to be added to the agenda. I'm sure we've all read some things in the paper or heard from people in person about concerns of the level of care at Fauquier Hospital. And we've just, we hear that transport is provided largely based on patient choice, or if it's a dire situation, the closest hospital will be the one that's used. And I just think that we might want to consider taking this on in the form of a letter to our state senator and representative, similar to the way we did the insurance situation at the Page County Hospital, and let them know that, we are hearing a lot of concerns from our community, and surely things that they've read in the paper about the level of care that folks are receiving at Fauquier Hospital, and that anything we can do to leverage improvements would be greatly appreciated by us and the people of Rappahannock County.
Yeah, I seem to, like all of us, be hearing a lot about Fauquier, and I was talking to someone recently, and both my children were born there, and we had an awesome experience, but that apparently was before the sale, so it seems like the sale of the hospital might have led thereafter to some lowering of the standard of care there. Yeah, I agree that we should say something, and I think just from a operations standpoint, I don't know if this is severe enough a situation, or it is a severe enough situation to make us think about where our citizens are transported, or if there's, in the case of an emergency, or if there's any operational decisions we can make in that regard. Obviously, we don't want to undermine public safety, and I think it depends a lot on where an emergency occurs geographically. And obviously, the hospital's functioning, it's accredited, but there are problems. So I just don't know where we draw the line and how we might act.
Perhaps We hear questions and concerns about any number of things that might come in. And it would occur to me that the first step would be to ask the hospital administration to share with the board what it is they're doing, what they acknowledge the situation is, and, you know, if there's any plan in place, and see if they're responsive to the board's concerns. And if they're not, then, you know, I think finding somebody else to listen would be very valuable.
I mean, I think if that's the first step that the board desires is to
Sure.
communicate with the administration at Fauquier Hospital, I mean, that's a reasonable first step as well.
Sure, and maybe ask for a hospital representative to talk to us.
Or if they have some sort of document already prepared, they acknowledge that they've had some issues and they have some sort of plan. I have no idea, but either that or have a human speak with the board.
Yeah, and I think we all read in the Rappahannock News a terrible situation that led to a wrongful death lawsuit in which they're involved. And while that person had not yet moved to Rappahannock County, open business, they were about to. And it was a really terrible story I think we all read. So, yeah, I mean, this is more than occasional anecdotal discussion about the function of that hospital. So I agree. Thank you for bringing it up.
Do we need a motion?
How would you like,
I would just move that the chair draft a letter in conjunction with staff, however that happened to look, and other members of the board, to reach out to Fauquier Hospital regarding community concerns in Rappahannock County and their plans for facility and care improvements.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Is that reasonably clear enough, Gary?
between what I'm writing and what's recorded? Absolutely.
I do agree, the last thing somebody needs to worry about when they're getting into an ambulance is where they're gonna go, so, I agree that this is a good first step, and, we'll be interested to see what we get in reply.
Well, I just don't want to create a situation too where people are saying, don't take me there.
Right.
And they're having longer transport times, and that is very, very dangerous.
It's very
was
scary.
happening 30 years ago.
So, I just think it's something that we should try to get ahead of.
Yeah, I think we owe it to people to try to work it out.
And, just speaking with Mr. Goff, he thinks it'd be important for him to review that letter and
Yes.
whether it's in the motion or not.
I will amend my motion to include and upon a review by the county attorney. Thank you, Mr. Goff.
Okay with the second
I
amendment?
amend my second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. All right, unsafe buildings.
Okay. Chair Donahue requested a briefing in a past meeting, I believe.
Yep.
Maybe matters presented by the board on the unsafe building process here in the county. This past board, sometime along the line, adopted Chapter 74 of your local ordinance. Let's see, or about 1990, which is based on the enabling clauses in Code of Virginia, Section 152906. That does allow the board to cause unsafe buildings to be mitigated in one or another way. But there is a defined process, and in general, I laid that out in the bullets. You have to receive a complaint, which can come from the public, a board member, or the county administrator. Upon receipt of that complaint, you need to schedule a discussion of the situation at a board meeting. I think there's at least 30 days later, with notice to the property owner. And then there'll have to be a decision then to set that situation onto a public hearing at another meeting. And that public hearing has to be properly noticed to the owner, if they didn't attend the first meeting, and the neighbors. After that public hearing happens, then the board can essentially require the owner to resolve the safety issue. That could be done through boarding up a building or taking down a building, any number of different ways. If they don't do it, then the board and staff can cause that to be done, and the cost or the expense of that work is chargeable and paid by the owners of the property, and may be collected by the locality as taxes are collected. It's a little bit different than putting a lien on the property. I think must be 152906 provides that extra enabling clause to basically bill them as taxes for the cost. So that's the process. There are definitely some structures in the community that that this would apply to. It might be that a step before going to the Board of Supervisors and having an actual meeting, if a complaint is received, would be a friendly letter to the owner to let them know what the process is. Say we're at the very beginning of this process, and before we even take step one, I want you to be aware of what the process is, so that you don't have to stand in front of the public and the board, and we can work this out before we even get there. And then depending on how they react to that, go through the formal process, which might have the end of the path being them or the board physically doing things through a contractor, most likely. So that's the process. If there's any questions, Art or I could probably answer them. We can pull up the code section and read through it line by line, or the state code, whatever the board wants to do.
Have we ever used this?
Mr. Frazier probably could tell you, I think the county came close to it for a building, and I think the owners maybe
Two
boarded
different
things
times.
up before actually going through the process. I don't know if Art has any
Right,
recollection.
it was, I know Mr. Fraser was here for that board meeting, and I can't remember what all went down as far as, they talked about Lombardi's.
Well, they were supposed to board it back up, but we were hoping that maybe he could do something, but it's been several years now.
And
There was
there's-
another one over in Rappahannock Lakes that the gentleman should have had means to do something different, but he chose to just board it up with plywood to make the neighbors mad.
Right, and so I think from the state code in my past history with these enabling clauses, you can't compel them to take the building down or fix it and make it nice. You really can only compel them to board it up. Now, if a structure isn't capable of being boarded up, then it really leads to take it down. There are zoning complications related to that that might have come into the circle of the conversation for the one in the Jackson district. And that is if it's an existing and non-conforming structure, doesn't meet current setbacks or lot size and all these things, and they take it down, they're losing that provision, that vested use. It could be argued that it's lost after 2 years anyway, but that could be punitive for somebody who had a use that just, they aren't quite there ready to bring it back to life. And if it's totally raised, then it may be lost forever.
Am I correct that anything within the town of Washington would slowly be under their purview?
Correct.
And do they have a parallel?
Well, you know, I
ordinance?
said that very quickly. I
The-
don't know.
People pay property taxes are
Well,
paid to the county. Even if
You know,
you're
this
in the
is part of 15.2. It's not part of chapter 22, which is zoning. The town takes on zoning themselves. So if it were part of 15.2, 2200, then I would say definitely it's the towns to do. I'd have to go back and look at the state code a little more carefully. See what it says.
Talks about the powers of the locality.
Yeah, they probably would reserve this onto themselves to implement or not. But that would take a little more work for Mr. Goff to sort that out.
I'll certainly let the mayor of the town of Washington know that we're at least starting this discussion, because I know for certain there's at least one structure in the town that has gotten to the point of ridiculousness,
And
One just outside of
this is a safety concern, not a view shed concern or anything like that.
Right,
It's safety.
right, agreed.
Gary, why were you saying all we can do is force them to board it up?
No, if they can render it to be safe, I think that we can't force them how it could be rendered to be safe, if they can render it to be safe through boarding it up or something. Or maybe reading it differently, so.
As the locality through its own agents or employees may remove, repair, or secure any building, wall, or other structure that might endanger the public health or safety of other residents of such locality.
So it would be the preceding paragraphs before we get to the county doing it on our own.
The owners of any property shall at such times as the governing body may prescribe remove or secure any building, wall, or other structure that might endanger public health.
Yeah, so I think it's that or, remove, repair, or secure. And if they secure, I think they've satisfied that list of things.
We just talk about voluntary compliance.
Or, yeah, at the first, if we don't ever get to the last bullet, which is you have refused to do it, then we're gonna do it.
Right, or they do it badly.
Right.
Well, I appreciate the effort on bringing all this information to us. I know there's some residents concerned about buildings that basically look like they've been abandoned. And so that's where I'm trying to really find out what the neighbors can do.
Yeah, and this does apply to an abandoned structure where maybe people are entering it who aren't supposed to enter it and doing who knows what. In those cases, the most likely scenario is that it would be boarded up so people can't get into it if the owner complied. And if the owner didn't comply, even though the board can seek that expense reimbursement from the owner, I don't know that you'd be hiring somebody to tear down a structure that is intact, just people are getting in and out, you probably board it up. But those decisions would come out through the process, and there might be extenuating circumstances that would lead the board to make a different decision.
Yeah. Good.
All right, thank you. Opioid abatement program. Mr. Jordan.
Probably could have placed this on the consent agenda, but wanted to make sure the board was familiar with what was happening with this. As you're all aware, the resolutions that have been adopted over the last several months, the board has accepted relatively significant for us funding stemming from Opioid Abatement Authority and settlements with several different companies that are involved in opioids. In addition to the direct funding that comes to the county and counties and cities, counties or regional groups can apply separately for additional separate funding for appropriate causes. The 5 counties that make up Planning District 9, who are all under the Rappahannock Regional Commission, have come together, and those are the same counties that are members, if you will, of the Rappahannock Community Services, soon to change their name to something else, in July. And RRCS has worked with Culpeper to develop a separate application for the regional funding that if we all join in, there's a better chance of those funds to flow through. The Culpeper would be the fiscal agent. RRCS would administer the grant, and we would be responsible for basically saying that we're interested in having this be a regional program with no administrative requirements of ours. Attached is the draft document that Culpeper is circulated, ultimately allowing them to apply for this regional program on behalf of all of us. And they've set that out with the county administrator signatures from each of the counties. Last I checked, I think Madison, Orange, and Culpeper have had this go through their process. I'm not sure about Fauquier, and of course we're here tonight.
I'll put forward a motion that we authorize the county administrator and or assistant administrator to execute the provided Virginia Opioid Abatement Authority Cooperative Agreement.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
So we're very thankful to Culpeper for taking the lead on this.
Great.
So Bonnie pushed on the process to make sure it was happening in a timely manner, and we were thankful when they stepped up.
All right, moving into board committee reports. Building committee.
Madam Chair, the building committee has been working towards a couple of different directions here. The one is trying to bring in a firm to help us to write the documents we need for, getting to bid. Of course, they would be drafts. This board would have to approve them because of the cost of the projects. But that's the path on that. We've got the old church, the sheriff's department, and then we still need to be looking toward getting work done on this building as well. The envelope, we can take care of that. So we're looking at getting a professional engineering or architectural firm to help with the drafting of the bid documents that would know the process for Virginia public procurement. Secondly, I guess we're looking at Saturday, the
May 13th?
13th, to have the project staked and a balloon or two in the air to give some sort of scope and size of the project for the proposed courthouse. So that's, didn't actually have a time set. That's the date.
No. That needs to happen soon, I suspect.
So we'll shake the bushes and see what's a good time for everybody, but it'll probably be like mid-morning through maybe early afternoon, so that gives people time to go about their Saturday morning business and then still come by here. That's really about it. Probably missing something because of notes, but.
Well, thank you. Recreational Facilities Authority.
So we had a great fodder stack race. We had about 380 registrants, which was, I think that's what the number was, somewhere around there, which was, in terms of our records, the highest number. Jonathan could not confirm, though, that if 40 years ago it had not been higher, it may have been. We just don't have the records. But we had a great race. We raised money for the park, which was fantastic. The playground committee met, had a really productive meeting, and things are just moving along. A lot of energy, so
It's great. It was a great race.
it was awesome.
Thank goodness it was nice weather.
I've got several compliments on the fence. People say that it looks good and they're glad it's up. And maybe that saga is behind us.
Hopefully. I can say that there's nothing now but good feelings between the board and the neighbors, and I hope that continues. And I agree. I think the fence was done in a once we started getting it done, the second and the third part, it went very quickly, and I thought they did a fantastic job. I do agree with you. And we've been during the dark skies, we've had an off-duty deputy sign up to help patrol it and be there, and that's gone really well. And it's Deputy Jenkins, Crystal Jenkins, that's been doing it. She's loved it, and she's actually looked through the telescope a number of times and really likes doing it. But that's actually helped the Dark Skies program, just having a deputy there to kind of oversee what's going on. And so it's been great. Everything's.
It's also Meet a Deputy Night.
It's also Meet a Deputy Night.
Yeah.
And I'll just say, pile on accolades for all that your very dynamic park board is doing. I ran into a young parent of a very young child last evening, actually, and he said that he had only recently discovered the park. I just couldn't believe how awesome it is. So I told him, stay tuned for better playground equipment. This child, I think it's just over a year old, so you've got time. But he was a really big fan and just was amazed, never having used the park before, how great it was. So thank you.
Public Safety Committee, we didn't meet. Do you know, Mr. Curry, if we're going to have a meeting coming up?
Well, quarterly, so I'll get back to you on that. I can't remember what we set aside. I thought we kind of fixed the whole year. So I'll have to look at my calendar.
Okay. Rules Committee.
We did not meet.
Planning Commission update.
We met and the notes are attached to the zoning administrator's report. And you'll hear more this evening on the other topics.
Yes.
Great.
Fire Levy Board.
We did not meet.
And most recently met, well, not since the last meeting, but most recently
right.
provided those recommendations.
yeah,
That was
that's right.
just before the last meeting.
That's right.
All right, treasurer's reports. Cash graph still looking good.
Yeah, I don't think there's any, anything out of ordinary with the reports.
Can we, I know I asked this at our last budget session. I mean, can we reliably extrapolate now going to the end of FY '23 to kind of see where we'll likely end up compared to our projections on sales and meals and lodging tax revenue? Are we ahead of what we projected in the FY '23 budget?
Yes, definitely.
By how much?
Pardon me?
By how much, like percentage?
I don't have the percents, but I can get back to you with that.
Yeah, I think it's always worthwhile to continue to refine our projections and not be too conservative and not too aggressive.
Yeah, that 12-month rolling total chart that
Yeah.
I think Bonnie sends out each month when the sales tax number is generated and received from the treasurer, that's the best way to see where you're trending.
Okay,
And the FY '23 budget was $993,000, and I think it was maybe $50,000 more than that or something like
on
that.
sales.
Right. So you could do something similar with the meals and lodging, but that's quarterly. It's kind of chunky chart.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all saw in this last budget session that even small dollars make a difference in terms of bridging the gap. So I just want to make sure that we're dialed in as much as possible. And you've done a great job, Bonnie. I just never want to lose sight of the need to make accurate projections, because I'd much rather rely on the fine tuning of projections than turn to a property tax increase or some other tax increase, because we feel like we have a deficit that we otherwise might be able to cover.
I do want to add that as you're reviewing the monthly reports that are posted to board docs, you need to understand that in many cases, accounting adjustments have not been made, and taxes that may be attributable to FY '22 at the very end of that fiscal year and beginning of this fiscal year are still in these
Okay.
books until they're pulled back. So you can't just take
I
these
understand.
numbers and say this percent and project forward. It's not quite that easy.
Something might, at the end, sort of final reconciliation get pulled out FY '23, ascribed FY '22, which would lower our revenue.
And the say the sales tax that you receive in July and August are FY '23 because it was 60 days, I think, is the accrual period, but it's basically generated on sales from FY '23.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, I get that. It's a timing difference.
Yeah. So as you look at the reports, just keep that in mind.
Yeah,
But providing you an updated estimate for meals and lodging and sales is definitely a doable
yeah.
task.
Yeah, I just think it's important for us to, I mean, just keep thinking about those projections and how close we've come and whether we're being too conservative. Because again, those small dollars really made a difference when we cobbled together a way this year to cover the projected deficit. So that's just one area where I just want to make sure we're as accurate as we can be. Obviously, they're projections, and I get that.
Right, and those are forecasts that we all discussed together. We discussed how aggressive we should be and conservative we should be,
Yeah.
and then 18 months later, when the end of that fiscal year happens, we can look back and say we were right on track or we weren't, and because these things happened that we didn't foresee.
One question I have just from a budget standpoint and real property tax revenue, there recently was a property sale that occurred. These were advertised in the paper. These were properties for which there's long overdue tax liability that had gone unpaid. Huge appreciation to the treasurer and her team for cleaning up those, that area of bad debt. And I know it's a lot of nitty gritty work to get to the point where those can be auctioned, but clearly, there's significant, from Rappahannock County standards, there's significant revenue generated as a result of that auction. And I wonder, what does that mean for us in terms of our FY '24 real property tax projections? Does it just get added on? Was it already embedded in what you were projecting for real property tax revenue for FY '24? Does this put us in now a different position vis-a-vis our already balanced and adopted budget? What impact does that sale have?
I don't think any sale that occurred in fiscal '23 is going to have an impact on fiscal '24.
Fair enough.
But I would say you consider the scale. I think it's $13 million of real estate revenue for taxes. And the forecast that is prepared does look back at delinquent taxes and tries to have an idea. And Ms. Jewell talked to you about this during the budget process of 3 different ways. She looked at forecasting that revenue source to try to make sure we are capturing all those pieces. Any portion that is in excess of what they owe, I think, is held for 2 years anyway.
Okay.
If there's not an apparent owner, which there isn't in these cases.
What, it goes into escrow and it's not available as part of our fund balance
Correct.
by law, I assume?
I think it's held in the circuit court.
Okay. All right, so it's a variable that it sounds like was contemplated in the real property tax revenue projections, because there's always a provision for recovery of bad debt. Is that
Yes, that's
okay?
correct. That is correct.
All right.
And I'll check with the treasurer and get back to you, get back to the full board on how that works.
Yeah.
In terms of the holding and all that.
Yeah, that's new to me. Okay, thank you.
Anything else in the information reports?
Let's see, you have your annual report from Laurel Ridge Community College, and Comcast wanted to tell us that one of their channels was changing their name. I don't know why that's important, but
It's crazy to me that that ends up on the agenda, but
doesn't have to. I can exclude all Comcast reports unless they're money related, if you would like.
Well, it would be our luck that we'd take it off and then they'd send us something important.
important. Yep.
Or somebody would say, how could you not tell me that channel was changing its name?
Yeah,
I couldn't find it.
all right. Matters presented by the board. Mr. Frazier.
Well, just briefly, they got that far? Matters presented by the board.
L1, I think that's on.
Yeah, what happened to the legal matters?
That was one thing that I should have mentioned, sorry. Chair Donahue asked if there was anything else in that list, and should have highlighted that. So I-4, review of legal matters, resume that reporting that was previously provided in this area, provided a brief for the 3 cases that are currently outstanding, provided a link to the Court of Appeals case information system, which shows that the appeal of the Capielli appeal is just not assigned any court date or anything. They've received all the paperwork. It's just sitting in the Court of Appeals. And I guess we'll know when we know. The Flint Hill Fire Company case, most of the board members are aware. Many of you were in the courtroom when Judge Plowman heard the demurs from the county, and then, as Chief Gerald stated, agreed that the consent order should be changed. To best of my knowledge, that's not been signed off by the court yet, so the change is not effective. The Caparucio et al., which is the road and sediment control case on Seven Ponds Road. The neighbor has filed a suit related to county implementing the local erosion sediment control law, and the speed at which that's being done. That matter has been assigned to Mr. Capps, the same attorney we have for the Flint Hill case, and I think Mr. Goff just set a kind of a first introductory call on that to be taking place this week. So that'll get kicked off and we'll see where we are.
A call on this lawsuit or a call on the enforcement of the soil and erosion
I'll
sediment?
call on the lawsuit. Mr. Goff has been engaged with the enforcement matter for several months. Staff has worked our way through the process. There are many extenuating circumstances related to the ownership of that parcel. And Mr. Goff is trying to seek compliance the best way he thinks is possible. Putting words in your mouth.
Right, it's kind of an unfortunate family situation. The good news is that the family is now stepping up to the plate. They have hired Mr. Huntley to try to deal with some of these kind of intractable issues, which I really don't think I ought to get into the details of, which those kind of the legal actions will be taken, according to Mr. Thorpe, within the next couple of weeks that involve petitions to the circuit court to take care of one of the family members who's a partner of a parcel. He's in need of allegedly he's in need of certain services and help. And so the family is stepping up to do that. Once that happens, I think that clears the way for the remaining owner to get into compliance with the sediment control regulations and get the ball rolling. One of the fears is you get out there, you build these silt fences, and during the night, the other owner comes up and tears them up. Couple of different, like, thinking out of the box solutions have been proposed, and I'll just tell this board that I don't think that, well, I should say it the other way. I think that with Mr. Thorpe now representing the family, that there will be much swifter and permanent action that will remediate the whole situation.
I hope the board understands, I mean, this is right up the road from my house. It's in the district I represent, and the neighboring property owners and plenty of people along the road are concerned that nothing has been happening, and they would like us to do nothing faster.
Yeah, my hands are tied as far as the details of it publicly.
Alrighty. Is that all you have there, Mr. Curry?
Yes, I try to answer questions. I don't know that I have much information beyond what is provided in the narrative here.
I have something that I'd like to say that's kind of related to some of this, but after there's some discussion, if there is.
I just had a question about the Capielli appeal. I know that when these appeals are filed, we're really at the mercy of the court as to when it'll be picked up and heard. Do we have any sort of benchmark from past experience that might inform a likely timeline?
This is actually a new process. Just last year, the zoning matters are going to the Court of Appeals rather than to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
So I don't know that there's really.
Well, as my law school professor, Professor Costello used to say that when you're dealing with an appellate court, you're looking at the rabbits in charge of the lettuce. That's all I can tell you. Is
Okay.
the rabbits are in charge of lettuce.
Okay.
Madam Chair, at our last meeting, April 3rd, we were in this discussion about whether we were going to add this to the agenda to have an attorney bring us some information, because I, for one, as a board member, I can't understand how things get filed on behalf of the board and no attorney ever meets with us. I don't see how that works, but anyway, so that led to the discussion that we had, and I had asked you, it was at the 1 hour and 34 minute place in the meeting, if you believe that all supervisors should received the same information at the same time. And you thought for a moment or two, but you said that, if it's about something legal, yes. And I didn't know until I did essentially a FOIA request a day or two later with Mr. Curry that you had already received an email this past week, that past weekend, April 1st, I believe, about the Flint Hill lawsuit, and that wasn't shared with the rest of the board. And I had a real point of contention with that email thread because it was from an attorney involved in that. He sent a threatening email back to Mr. Connick about sending me a subpoena. And I didn't get it until I essentially have to do a FOIA request to the county administrator. And this is not the first time that that's happened. I should not, as an elected member of the governing body, have to FOIA the county administrator or any of my colleagues to find out information like that. And I have complained several times over the last 4 years, actually your entire term on the board, that I don't think I'm getting information that y'all are getting, or I'm not getting included in conversations, and yet I get emails to prove that and nothing changes. So I just want to say that first off, y'all don't have the authority to dictate to Mr. Curry what information I'm supposed to receive or when I receive it. You don't have that authority. But yet somebody seems to be exercising that authority. And Mr. Curry, you unilaterally don't have the authority to determine what I will get and when I will get it. You don't have that authority, sir. But yet you have exercised it. And my email to y'all last month was that I hope that that was the last time that that would occur. I truly hope it is. And I'm going to close by saying this, that I view this as what Mr. Curry has been involved in and what the board members have been engaging in is a systematic process of depriving me of information that not only is critical to good and open government, but that I need to properly represent my constituents. Because of these actions, I am unable to provide the same level of representation that other supervisors are able to provide because of the unequal access to information. We're talking about a 14th Amendment constitutional right here. And everybody at this table has taken an oath to uphold both the Virginia and the U.S. Constitution. And if I find that this happens once more, I'm not going to sit here and complain about it. We're going to let another entity weigh in on it.
I'll just, for the record, and I appreciate you putting your statement together. It's very well articulated, well said. I can tell you, Mr. Frazier, as your colleague, I can look you straight in the eye and tell you that I've never, ever received any information about legal matters intentionally or by accident, as far as I know, that, as far as I know, you also received. So I appreciate and respect everything you just said, but I want to make clear so that as one board member, I'm not implicated in whatever potential action you might take later. I'm not out there trying to keep information from you or any other colleague at all.
But yet you did that. You and Ms. Donahue had an email that referenced me and Ms. Smith in it from another county employee and didn't share that with us.
Yeah, and if I didn't pick up on the fact that you were not copied on that I certainly apologize for that. But again, I would never intentionally work around you or not share information with you. And if I was a passive recipient of something on which you were not copied, while I cannot accept blame for that, I also say that your point is well taken, and I appreciate your statement.
Appreciate that.
I appreciate it as well, and I'm not exactly sure what email we're referring to, but I can tell you that I don't check distributions. I read the bit of the email that I think is important to me, and then I keep going on. So if there was something that you should have gotten that you didn't receive, it was definitely not intentional.
Well, I appreciate that, but I just know that it has happened several times. And this is something I've noticed several times. Both Ms. Smith and I have written an email to the county administrator, and by way of reply, he would copy us all. But we rarely see anything that comes from one of y'all like that. So either y'all aren't writing anything of any importance to the county administrator singularly, or it's one-sided. And maybe something I write is of county importance, and he decides that it is, and he shares it with all the members, and I don't have a problem with that. But the problem I have is I don't see it reciprocate. It doesn't reciprocate at all.
I know when I joined the board, I joined the board in 2020, sort of on the tail end of a big dust up over Freedom of Information Act actions or non-actions. And so I've always, in terms of email communication, I've always been sensitive to the fact, and you've taught me a little bit about this, that if I send an email to 2 other members and then that leads to continuous exchange, that itself can constitute,
Electronic meeting.
quote unquote meeting, right? So, I mean, for sure, I mean, you're welcome to FOIA anything I write, but I mean, for sure I write to the county administrator and copy one member so as not to run afoul of that rule, written or unwritten. So, and then I think the county administrator, in his defense, does a really good job of, I mean, I think if anyone here is a FOIA expert, Mr. Curry is, and I think he does a good job of involving others if one board member raises an issue. And we saw that, in fact, on Saturday and under relatively tragic circumstances when we received a confidential personnel email that was driven, I believe, from an inquiry you had made. So I think we all really earnestly do our best in this regard. And again, I want to reiterate, I do not try to carve you out of anything.
Yeah, I can say honestly that I learned very early on. My brothers and I, as you are aware, play in a band. And I realized a long time ago that if I ever wanted to get anything done, sending an email was a terrible way to try and get it done. So I learned very early on to make phone calls. And that's why I called you, I don't know, a couple months ago about the appropriation for I just don't send a whole lot of emails. I just pick up the phone, and Gary probably can attest that he might see my phone number coming through and not want to pick it up because I call him all the time.
I don't have caller ID.
Okay, maybe you should have it. But I have to say honestly that I don't really send a lot of emails. And that I agree with you. I would never ever intentionally leave you out of anything. And you and I have talked about this before in meetings, and I agree with you that it is not good governance to do it that way. And
If
that
the
we should-
information's there and one of us has it, we all should
Yeah.
receive it.
Yeah, and I think, and I mean, you've raised very valid points, and I think just having a brief discussion about this, and again, thank you for your statement. I think we can all take that under advisement and try, if to the extent there have been shortcomings, try to do better in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're into the matters presented by the board. Did you want to continue?
Well, Mr. Curry had mentioned it briefly with the Community Services Board voting to change their name, and I would think that with money being as tight as it is, that instead of doing the same thing that the community college did, saying that people, didn't understand or didn't know how to get a hold of them or something like that, that they would just try to work a little bit harder in that vein instead of, spending all this money on a rebranding and a name change. I really don't understand why people let their egos get in the way of public service. I mean, they want to change something, they want to brand something, they want to put their stamp on something. That Community Services Board has been there, according to them, for 50 years. And yet, all of a sudden, with this new group of directors and a new executive director, they're finding out that people don't know how to find their services and, be able to use them. There's something wrong there. And it's not the name. Maybe it's the people in charge. So I think that we ought to, at least I'm going to mention it when they come up here asking for more money or to approve the budget request that they put in, whether it's the same amount of money as last year or lower, I'm gonna ask them, how do they justify that? How much did it cost? How do they justify it? It's, I mean, it's kind of like, I went to school in Springfield, West Springfield High, and a gentleman on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors was 2 years behind me in high school. He's 49, but anyway, he sends me, I'm on his email list, and he sends me this stuff where this appointed body, they're coming up with all these different names that they want to change in Fairfax County, and one of them was Springfield. Well, I didn't know that there was anything racist or derogatory or anything about Springfield, and they couldn't even come up with something. For some reason, they wanted to change it because they didn't think it was relative anymore, but in Fairfax County, there's probably in the thousands of legal documents that relate, maybe tens of thousands, to the name of Springfield or West Springfield. And, I mean, people have just lost their mind with all this name changing. And I think that this board needs to put its foot down before we're asked to change the name Rappahannock because somebody got offended that's only going to live here for 3 months. We give them money. We appoint those directors, and then they go change the name without ever talking to us? How does that happen?
I have no idea.
This is my rant for the day.
Thank you.
They
Ms. Smith?
come give an annual report. I guess we'll hear about that in their annual report.
Sure. We can ask Mr. LeGraff to answer it in advance of an annual report.
I mean, I'd like to know, I mean, we've said, I know, at least I've asked, as long as I've been on the board, for more services in the county. And I'd like to know what motivates an organization to undertake a name change before having service representatives in the county.
Reach out to Mr. LeGraff and ask.
I'd be very curious.
And I think their board chair is from Rappahannock, so.
Correct.
Anything else, Ms. Smith?
I don't have anything else.
Mr. Whitson?
Just very quickly, you might remember a year and a half ago, I mentioned to this board that I was trying to help constituents who reside really close to the Washington town boundary, where there is a water line, trying to help them get some fire hydrants reinstalled. There's one on Piedmont that was taken out of service, and you know, I went on a little vacation last summer, so I'm a little behind on this project. But there was a fire on Piedmont a couple of weeks ago, and that fire hydrant is sitting idle. And I just want to give a heads up to everyone that I'm going to talk to the mayor and try to get a cost estimate of what it would take to get a fire hydrant reinstalled there. And maybe there might be one other location. I'm thinking down the fodder stack, just outside of town or you know, close to the boundary of town where the water line extends. Because I just think to the extent that there's a water system there, it's not right to leave an entire road without a fire hydrant. It doesn't make any sense. So I give you a heads up because I don't know from a cost perspective where we stand on restricted infrastructure related ARPA funds or.
Right, so today, actually, you
in the consent
took the action to allocate those so that you could free them up with the greatest amount of flexibility.
Yeah.
So if that's a project the board thinks the town isn't going to pursue and is most appropriate for the board to pursue it on behalf of the citizens, I think you have the flexibility to do that.
It doesn't really matter
Right.
why it's not there, but it needs to be
Yeah,
there.
I want to get it done, and so what I'll do next month is come back with hopefully some more details about how many hydrants and what the cost would be. But I just, it's a disservice to those citizens. I want to fix it, whether we kind of meet the town halfway in terms of cost sharing, I think is also beside the point. I mean, obviously I want to try, but the important thing is to get it done.
Well, that was a decision that the town made. They took that hydrant offline. on purpose.
I think it
I was
was,
in the room when the decision was made.
was it non-functional or?
No, they opted not to hook it up. It was a choice not to hook it up. And the quote was, if there's ever a fire there, the hoses will reach. And I remember it vividly because it was strikingly indifferent to an area that houses many, many families.
Yep, so I wasn't here for that discussion, so I say let's just try to solve the problem.
I think the price at the time was $25,000.
Okay. Figure it out.
The line runs straight up the hill from
Yeah, and
that
there-
corner, and so you should be able to put something at that corner.
Yeah, and I have been out there once with former Mayor Catlin, and there's a logical spot where a hydrant could go. So really, it's just a matter of nailing down the cost and then figuring out how to pay for it.
That was the Piedmont one, that they,
Yeah,
the other one would be a new one.
I think so. And that's, I'm just thinking out loud because I remember when I brought this up the last time, I thought maybe there'd be some opportunity for gaining economies of scale. And if there was another area of need, to take care of more than one at the same time.
Yeah, famous last words, I guess. I don't think it should cost that much, but those valves are expensive.
Well, that's my memory too. It might not be right, but
Yeah.
that's the
No,
number
so
that comes to
From an
mind.
engineering perspective, putting one on Piedmont shouldn't be a problem because that's the main line up to the tank.
Yeah,
Somewhere else might not be feasible because the pipe to that location at the end of the line might be small.
okay, I
So,
got you.
But, it's something we'll have to be reviewed.
Yeah, and so I think and I appreciate that input. So I think we need to start with Piedmont and just get that one done. So I'll just bring that back next month. I just wanted to give you an early heads up.
Mr. Carney?
I don't know.
The only thing I have is, you all saw the pictures of the Strobel family's house that burnt down on Friday. Something that shocked me when I was talking to Mrs. Strobel was that they were lucky to get out of the house. Her and her mom were there. And they said it's like 8 to 10 minutes that you have to get out of your house in a fire now because everything burns so rapidly. It was shocking to me, and I know we had companies from Warren and Linden and probably multiple other areas, Fauquier would be my guess, and then multiples from the county that had to refill the tankers on multiple occasions. So it was fought hard, but you saw the pictures. It was a total loss. And I just wanted to bring that up because I know they were devastated, and a lot of people have already stepped up to help them. So hopefully that will continue. This community comes together well when things like that happen. I know Shannon Enos, who had the same situation, reached out almost immediately because she had lived it. So the other thing I have, Eileen Road got, I guess,
Chip seal.
chip sealed.
Yeah, I did talk to, I can jump in. 'Cause
Okay, please.
Yeah, so, my constituent over there, and I think we're probably talking to the same person. So I did contact David Jenkins about that.
Okay.
And so the road was chip sealed. I didn't know they were going to do that. And then what he explained to me, and Mr. Curry can confirm if this is correct, once the underlying, material cures, then they come back and brush any excess gravel off of it, because the question I received, it wasn't really a complaint, the question was, why is there gravel all over Eileen Road? So is that,
The question I got was more, why was it chip sealed instead of paved if they were gonna
Yeah.
do anything? And then why did we not know about it ahead of time? And I'm like, well, I
I didn't know about it either.
Well, I think probably you all knew about it, and the paving schedule that was shared through your VDOT report a few months ago listed that as a secondary road that would have its surface taken care of through that manner. But I know we don't all focus on that. I'm surprised before now, I haven't heard a lot about that. It's a conversation I have with VDOT after they start doing these secondaries, and they're asking, have we got any complaints yet? Because that's the way it works. They
Okay.
go out there and they do, put the wearing surface on, and the complaints come in because particularly if there's kids who like to ride the bike or skateboard or something like that, you can't do that anymore.
Is
So-
there any way to know closer to the event?
We are supposed to receive a 2-week look ahead, and they told me they would do that. I did not get it for that road. I think the contractor uses the Eileen parking lot as a laydown area, so maybe it was the easy one to do.
All right. Thank you very much. We can recess until 7 PM.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds good.